My selfish boss canceled my vacation days without notice and smirked. Work is more important than your honeymoon. Furious, I submitted my resignation that night. The next morning, the CEO called me and said, "Actually, I want you to replace him." My former boss's jaw dropped as I walked into his office and took his chair. I've been working at a mid-sized tech company in Chicago for the past 5 years. Over time, I climbed the ranks to become a project manager, overseeing a dedicated team. The work was demanding, but I took pride in delivering quality results. My fiancée, Sarah, and I had been planning our wedding and honeymoon for over a year. We were set to spend 2 weeks in Hawaii, a much-needed break from our hectic lives. 6 months before the wedding, I submitted my vacation request to my boss, Bob Simmons. Bob was known for his rigid demeanor and unwavering focus on work above all else. He rarely engaged in personal conversations and had a reputation for being unsympathetic to employees' personal needs. When I handed him the request, he glanced at it briefly and said, "We'll see." Concerned about the ambiguity, I approached HR to ensure my request was documented. They confirmed that my request had been received and assured me there shouldn't be any issues. Trusting the process, I continued with my wedding preparations. As the wedding approached, I reminded Bob of my upcoming leave multiple times. Each time, he responded with a non-committal, "We'll see." This lack of confirmation made me uneasy, but with HR's assurance, I believed things would work out. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an email from Bob stating, "Due to pressing project deadlines, your vacation request has been revoked. Work is more important than your honeymoon." I was stunned. I had meticulously planned my workload to ensure a smooth transition during my absence. My team was prepared and deadlines were on track. Furious and feeling undervalued, I made a decision that night. I drafted my resignation letter, detailing the lack of respect for personal boundaries and the toxic work culture. I sent it to Bob and CC'd HR. The next morning, I received a call from the CEO, Jonathan Clark. He requested a meeting immediately. Upon entering his office, I found Bob already seated, looking pale and anxious. "After reviewing your resignation letter and considering your exemplary track record," Mr. Clark began, "I've decided to make some organizational changes. Effective immediately, Bob will be stepping down, and we'd like you to take his position." Bob's mouth fell open in shock. He turned to me, eyes wide with disbelief. I accepted the promotion, feeling a mix of vindication and determination to foster a healthier work environment. As I settled into my new role, I implemented policies that valued employees' personal lives, understanding that a satisfied team leads to greater productivity. Bob's downfall served as a reminder that empathy and respect are crucial in leadership. Sarah and I enjoyed our honeymoon, and upon returning, I led my team with renewed vigor, ensuring that no one else would have to choose between their personal happiness and their professional responsibilities. When I walked into Bob's office for the first time as his replacement, it didn't feel like victory. Not exactly. It felt unfinished. Bob wasn't fired. He had been reassigned to some internal position in a far corner of the company, something vague that clearly meant, "Sit down and stay quiet." The day I took over, he wasn't in the office. But his junk was. His golf mug, his weird neck massager, and stacks of poorly labeled folders. There was also a note taped to the desk that simply said, "Good luck." It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't friendly. Just cold. Just Bob. I cleared the desk and spent that first week getting a feel for the chaos he left behind. I found out fast. Bob had burned a lot of bridges. My team wasn't just overworked, they were exhausted, paranoid, and a few had even applied to other jobs. He had approved crazy deadlines without input, sent aggressive emails at midnight, and ignored every single suggestion from the senior devs. Fixing it would take time. But I was in. Fully in. 3 weeks in, things started shifting. A few people stayed late voluntarily. My team meetings had actual laughter in them. I thought we were on the right path, until one Friday afternoon, I got an email from the CFO with the subject line, "Urgent, unauthorized budget approvals." When I opened it, it hit me like a train. Bob had signed off on a $150,000 vendor contract just 3 days before his demotion. It was approved in my name. Except I hadn't signed anything. Attached was the invoice, the contract, and a copy of a signature that looked kind of like mine. Sloppy. Rushed. But fake. Very fake. I called the CFO immediately and told him the truth. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Well, you'll need to speak to legal, because it's your name on that paper." I didn't sleep that night. Monday morning, I went through every folder Bob had left behind. Buried under a pile of old training manuals was a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop in the privacy of my office. Inside, one folder, no password, labeled meetings. Recordings. Hours of them. Bob had recorded meetings with vendors, clients, even internal chats. I scrubbed through them quickly. On one, dated exactly 4 days before I took his job, he was on a call with the vendor in question. "Just get it signed and pushed through," he said. "He'll take the fall if it blows up. Won't matter. I'll be long gone." I froze. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a bad boss. Bob had set me up. I took everything, recordings, contracts, my notes, and walked into the CEO's office without a meeting. He looked at me, confused. I laid it all out. He listened. Said nothing. Just nodded slowly. Then he picked up his phone and dialed legal. The next week, Bob was officially fired. But that wasn't the end. A week after Bob was gone for good, I noticed weird activity in our project tracker. Tasks were being changed, dates shifted, notes deleted. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I got a Slack message from one of the junior analysts. "Hey, did you delete all my sprint notes from last week?" I hadn't. I pulled the logs. Someone had been logging into the system using admin access. An account that wasn't mine. IT confirmed it. Bob had made a backdoor login before he left. He was still in the system. I called the CEO again. We sat down with IT, legal, and HR. This wasn't just sabotage, it was corporate espionage. And it opened the company up to serious risk. They began a full audit. Every file Bob ever touched. Every vendor. Every budget item. Meanwhile, I was getting anonymous messages through my personal email. "You didn't deserve that chair. You'll burn like I did." And once, "Don't trust your team." It was creepy. But more than that, it made me doubt. Was someone helping him from the inside? How else was he getting access? Then it hit me, the IT intern. Quiet guy. Smart. Bob always gave him special treatment, and he vanished the same day Bob was fired. No warning. Just stopped showing up. HR thought he'd ghosted. But what if it wasn't that simple? I needed to find him. I started digging into the intern. His name was Devin Hargrove. Barely 21. Quiet, always on time. Did what he was told. Never spoke unless asked. I remembered seeing him outside Bob's office a lot, usually with a laptop. I figured Bob liked him because he didn't talk much and followed orders. That was my mistake. HR said Devin never filed a resignation or gave notice. He was just gone. His company email was still active, but untouched since the day Bob was fired. I called IT and asked for access to Devin's account logs. After some pushback, they sent me a file of his recent activity. It wasn't what I expected. 2 days before he disappeared, Devin downloaded a full backup of our client database. All of it, contracts, contact info, pricing models, even some internal emails between clients and account managers. A few hours later, he logged into our analytics platform from a personal device and exported performance reports going back 2 years. Then nothing. He ghosted. I flagged it all to legal, who immediately started a data breach investigation. If any of that info had been leaked, we were facing not just lawsuits, potential fines from regulatory bodies too. This wasn't just sabotage anymore. This was a full-on security crisis. And just when I thought things couldn't spiral more, I got another email. From Devin. No subject line. No message body. Just a single file attached. Truth_finaled, MOV. I didn't open it on my work computer. I forwarded it to my personal email and watched it at home that night. The video was grainy. Looked like it had been recorded on a webcam. Devin sat in a dimly lit room, wearing a hoodie, eyes wide. He looked scared. Really scared. This is for whoever finds it. I messed up. I didn't know what I was getting into, he said. Bob told me it was just data backups. Said it was part of his transition plan. That the CEO had approved it. He paused, took a shaky breath. But then he showed up at my place. 2 nights ago. Said I owed him. That I needed to hold on to the data. Just for a while. He gave me a burner phone and a list of files to monitor. Told me to keep him informed about anything the new guy, meaning me, was doing. Devin looked away from the camera. I think he's watching me. I think he's watching all of us. The screen went black. That was it. I sent the video to legal the next morning. They froze every access point, wiped all backdoor logins, and looped in federal cybercrime investigators. Things moved fast after that. The FBI got involved. Bob was gone, but he hadn't been working alone. Devin wasn't the only one. They traced another leak back to a former vendor Bob had used, someone with a grudge, someone who'd been paid under the table. We were in a full-blown federal case. And I was in the middle of it. But the worst part wasn't the legal chaos or the media firestorm that came after. It was the sudden shift in my own team. Some people started keeping their heads down. Others whispered in corners. Trust cracked like glass. One day, one of my best senior engineers, Monica, walked into my office and closed the door. I need to tell you something, she said. Her voice was low, but steady. Turns out, Bob had offered her a side contract 2 months before he got booted. Triple her normal pay off the books. All she had to do was monitor team loyalty and report anything concerning to him. She declined. But someone else hadn't. She didn't know who. That broke me a little. The idea that someone I worked with, maybe still worked with, had been feeding Bob information, possibly still was. We had security sweep the building. Every desk, every conference room, every laptop. Found 2 devices hidden in the main boardroom, audio recorders. New. Recent. I stood in that room and felt my stomach twist. Bob was gone. But he was still pulling strings somehow. Still watching. And I had no idea what his endgame was. After the sweep, I couldn't trust anyone fully. Every meeting felt like a trap. Every hallway glance, every silent nod, it all felt off. I started to question myself too. Maybe I had been too quick to trust. Too eager to take Bob's seat. Maybe I was so focused on fixing things, I didn't see the damage happening right under my nose. I hired a private cybersecurity team to run a deep audit off the books, out of pocket. I didn't tell legal, didn't even tell the CEO. I needed the truth without filters. They found something I didn't expect. A set of login pings from an IP address registered to a condo on the north side. It didn't belong to Bob. It belonged to me. But I'd never logged in from that address. That's when it hit me, Bob had cloned my identity online. Emails, account logins, even my Slack messages. I'd been sabotaged from the start, and I didn't even know. Every decision I made, every mistake that slipped through, I thought it was mine. But it wasn't. Someone had been copying my digital fingerprint. I was furious. But I wasn't stupid. I quietly set up a sting. We created a fake project, high-level, high-stakes, with a fictional partner company. Only a handful of people were told. I waited. 3 days later, the fake documents were accessed from that same North Side IP address. I called the FBI contact directly. Gave them everything. They moved fast. They traced the condo to a shell lease signed under Devin's name, but it was Bob who answered the door. He had never left Chicago. He'd been running his game from inside the city, watching, leaking, framing. They arrested him on the spot. When the news hit the office, people were stunned. But it didn't end there. Monica, the engineer who warned me, was also arrested. Turns out she'd lied. She had taken the deal. She was feeding Bob live information and sabotaging internal code builds to make me look incompetent. Her confession came out during the investigation. She flipped when she realized she was going to jail. gave them everything. Even Devin turned himself in and testified, which helped him get a lighter sentence. He admitted to forging my signature and installing malware on company machines. Said he thought Bob was protecting him, like a mentor. He looked like a broken kid during the trial. I was cleared. Fully. The company made a public statement. The CEO personally apologized to me in front of the whole office. Called me a hero for rooting out the corruption. But I didn't feel like a hero. I'd made mistakes. I trusted too easily. I ignored the early signs. I put people in danger because I wanted to be the fixer. I didn't vet my own team. I walked into Bob's chair thinking I could just do it better. That ego almost burned the whole place down. I stayed on 6 more months. Then I left. Not out of shame, but because I was done. I'd done what I came to do. I cleaned up the mess. I exposed the rot. But I couldn't sit in that office anymore without feeling the weight of it all. Bob got 7 years in federal prison. Monica got 5. Devin walked out with 2 years of probation, community service, and a ban from working in IT for a decade. The company recovered. Slowly. As for me, I moved to Colorado. Started consulting. Smaller teams, less drama, more honesty. Every time someone asks about leadership or company culture, I just tell them one thing: don't ignore the quiet ones. And never trust a man who smiles while canceling your honeymoon.